haven't you been on Coast to Coast before?
I have. I was on Coast to Coast with George Knapp. He said, I want to invite you back, but he hasn't yet. So he's busy.
Yeah, come on,
That's
George.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's fucking
Maybe
legendary.
maybe I can get an invitation with this conference coming up.
Guessing so,
That'd
yeah.
be great.
Oh, did you ever have the chance to meet Art Bell from Coast to Coast?
No, I didn't. Unfortunately, I was on the show that a lady took over for him after he passed away and that, but I never got a chance to meet him, unfortunately. I have met George. I met him in person. I did a talk at the UFO MegaCon in Lofton, Nevada in 2019, and I got to meet George then.
Yeah.
Cool. Have you met Linda Moulton Howe?
Yes, in fact, numerous times. When I filmed Ancient Aliens a few years back, they film it at a very special location, and it is a secret. And I can't tell you, but it's a wonderful historical location. I can tell you that. And I was being filmed in the morning, and of all people, Linda was being filmed at this location in the afternoon. So our crossover was at lunch, and the production crew bought us both lunch. So the director
Cool.
and everybody else and Linda and we got to sit around a table, but I had actually met her before that. So it was kind of cool to reunite. And then I've talked to her after that. So
That's great.
very, very, very inquisitive person,
Yes, she is.
Yeah,
She's awesome. No, I love her early work too with the cow mutilations and stuff like that, and how involved she's gotten so far. Yeah, she's great work. Love it.
Yeah. When you met George Knapp, did you talk about the David Grush case with him?
No, this was long before that.
Oh, long before that. Okay.
Yeah, Grush is recent. I think, geez, this would have to be 2018, 2019. No, this was I met Knapp in 19, and I didn't want to mess up the Georges. I actually have a couple of pictures of me and George Nory at a party, and the other George on Coast to Coast, and he's a fun guy too. So George Nory, a friend of mine and a friend of his, tried to get me on George's show, and it's really stupid, but George refused because of the title of my third book, Swamp Gas My Ass. He would not use the phrase my ass on his show. And he told my friend, well, I'd love to have him on, but we can't say that title on my show. And I thought, well, that's the whole point of going on your show, is telling you the story that's encapsulated in the book. So for that reason, George and I probably will never connect on his show.
Yeah, I like the title, man. I like the title. Got the book here. Yeah,
Hilarious.
let's talk about that later too. I have some
Okay.
notes on that too. Okay, I'd say let's jump right into your story, Raymond. Like I said before, you worked at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for quite a long time.
I did.
Let's start with what was your job there, and how did you get the job?
I'm a graduate of the University of Detroit, and the University of Detroit has an excellent engineering program. So I was a student there, and after you finish your sophomore year, they have what's called a cooperative education program. So they try to place the engineering students with an organization that maybe needs some summer help or whatever. So the co-op, or short for cooperative education, the co-op program placed me at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So they said, yeah, we've had a long running connection to the University of Detroit, and we always have co-op students coming in and out. And the hope is that you're going to learn the environment. You'll get to see what kind of work they do, what kind of work you might do in the future after you graduate. You get to know people, so that if you take a job there, you can kind of hit the ground running. You're just not a deer in the headlights. So I accepted that job there in January of 1973. And I would go there for 4 months and work, go to 4 months of school, return to work. So I would do that until I had got 12 months of work experience in. So that's how I started as a co-op student. And then when I graduated in 1975, they offered me a full-time position, which I accepted.
Interesting. So, but now with all we know, Patterson Wright Air Force Base is not your regular Air Force Base, maybe. When did you start to notice that something is not something is out of the ordinary there?
Well, that was my first week.
Oh,
My very first week in January of 1973. When you're a co-op student, they assign you to somebody who is more senior than you. You know, they're supposed to show you the ropes, tell you certain things, get you acclimated to the base, your work, and they act like a mentor. So my mentor, and I wrote about this in my first book, which I shamelessly put on a t-shirt.
damn. Yeah.
Shameless ad. So, and I wrote about the story in this book. The guy named Al said, hey, we're going to go through this hangar that connects these two business offices. The hangar was empty. And I'm going to show you where the coffee shop is. You get sandwiches there, a cup of soup, candy bars. I'm going to buy you a candy bar as kind of a welcoming gift. And I said, hey, love it, free candy bar. So we go down this little tiny ramp that exits the connected office building, and we go into this very empty space. And it's about 200 feet to go through this empty hangar to the other side, which is another twin 2-story office building. So we go through this empty hangar, and it's dark and it's dingy. And he says to me, have you heard about our aliens? I'm like, what? He said, you know, the aliens here at Wright-Patt. And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. He said, well, you know, back in the 40s, there was a crash of a flying saucer, and they brought the occupants and the vehicle here for evaluation and exploitation. So I said, really? Well, where do they keep this stuff? He said, well, they keep them in the tunnels. And I'm like, we have tunnels? He goes, oh, yeah, we have tunnels. And I said, well, can we go see these aliens in the tunnels? And his response was, well, no, we can't. Well, geez, Al, why not? Well, because it's a secret. Well, Al, if it's a secret, how do you know? I mean, I was only a co-op student, but I was smart enough to ask the question, you know, and at that time I didn't even know what an official secret was, because it's my first week on the base, and you know, you don't get that stuff till much later. So he goes, you know, the word secret got bantered around too many times in one paragraph. Look at the time, let's go get that candy bar. So as the weeks and months of my co-op goes on, and he introduces me to different people in different departments, and I got to know them, I might bump him into the hall and say, hey, listen, man, I know this is really weird, but Al tells me that everybody on this base knows that Wright-Patterson had crash flying saucers and aliens, and everybody, they go, oh yeah, real casual. Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's, you know, is that true? Yeah, of course. Yeah, I know. I'm looking at the expression on your face. So as you dig deeper, what you find out is that the base personnel were all aware that Project Blue Book was there. And Project Blue Book got a lot of publicity, both in the base newspaper, the Dayton Daily News. If you look at the local newspapers, you'll find that they got a lot of publicity because they were complicit in the cover-up. It was the local newspaper and media's job to put forward whatever story the Air Force put forward. And so if you go back and you read the Dayton Daily News, there is never, ever a contrary opinion. There's not somebody questioning the official storyline. So everybody on base was aware that Project Blue Book, which did all the investigations on Sign and Grudge, the predecessors, that was what they knew, and what was spoken about in those press releases were, yes, FTD, who was the home of Project Blue Book, their job was to gather foreign material that hit the earth, regardless of whose it was. as long as it fell out of the sky and wasn't ours, they were to gather up and bring it to Wright-Patterson for investigation. And so knowing that was the job of FTD, and that same organization was connected to flying saucers, a natural connection was made. And the assumption was, oh, well, they must be collecting flying saucers that crashed because that's their charter. So even though nobody ever maybe said that publicly, that was that leap of faith that everybody could take. And so it became a joke. Yeah, we got their aliens, they're in the tunnel, and their crash saucers are there. And that's how that all came about, not through any official proclamation.
Oh, damn, that's very exciting, man. So, but you've never seen something yourself, right?
Yeah, that's a question everybody asks me.
Right.
And here's the response that I like to give, because it's titillating and it gets me more invitations on more radio shows.
Yeah.
Nobody, regardless if they have seen anything, one, is allowed to say anything because of the classification level of that thing, nor, if they've seen anything, do they want to be that guy that comes out and says that. Nobody wants to be that guy. Now, that said, I can tell you this. I've seen a lot of people working at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base when I was there that I would swear were aliens. You guys ever watch the movie Men in Black?
Of course.
You've seen them? All right. You go to the post office scene, right?
Yeah.
Where
Right.
the guy's
no.
in the machine and he's sorting and all those other weird. I'm telling you, dudes,
No.
there are many people at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base that I would go, in my brain would go, that's an alien. I'm sorry. That is an alien. Now, that is all I'm willing to say.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough, Raymond. So
Dang.
maybe let me rephrase my question. What is the closest you've ever got to seeing stuff?
You don't really know, because unless you're read into it, let's back it up. I'll ask, I think the question that you're trying to get to is, what do I make of all of those rumors about flying saucers at Wright-Patterson and crashed wreckage at Wright-Patterson? And let's handle this, the easy stuff first, because I have some facts that I can point to, and then we can look at the other things that maybe don't have as much support. Okay, what do we know? Well, we know that in July 1947, something crashed on the Foster Ranch. Everyone likes to call it, you know, they don't refer to it as the Foster Ranch. They talk about the guy who recovered it, the rancher. So the rancher brings the stuff into Roswell. Roswell brings it to the base, and the base looks it over and says, we have us a crashed disc. Now, these guys were intelligence officers who were in charge of the 509th Bombing Group, the only nuclear bombing group in the world. And it worries me, not that they lied and changed their story the next day, because what did they do? They said General Ramey empties the saucer story and it's not a flying saucer. What bothers me is that the guys in charge of dropping nuclear weapons could not tell the difference between a flying saucer and a weather balloon. That bothers the heck out of me. So what do we know about the crash wreckage, whatever it was? We know that it went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. How do we know this? Because Jesse Marcel Sr., the first Air Force guy on the scene, on the Foster Ranch, was the guy who picked up the wreckage. And he claims in an interview in 1978 that that wreckage was tested superficially. They took a big piece. They found one piece that was 2 feet wide and 3 feet long. Tried to bend it with a sledgehammer. It didn't bend. It didn't cut. It didn't tear. It didn't burn. They would crumble pieces of it and it would go back to its original shape. So using this as evidence, their observations were used to declare we have a crashed flying saucer. So Jesse Marcel, he takes this, he is ordered by General Ramey to take it to the 8th Army Air Force headquarters in Fort Worth, and they load it up, I think, on a B-29. They fly it in the next day. They take it in. Here is a very little known piece of information. When they brought a huge amount of this wreckage, now there was Cavett was the other guy, the other Air Force guy that went to the Foster Ranch to pick up the debris. They filled a personal vehicle and they filled a carry-all, like a big Jeep. So they had lots of this stuff. And they flew it all to the 8th Army headquarters. But all of that material was not unloaded into General Ramey's office. They had stuffed a courier bag full of stuff that was supposed to be the crash wreckage.
Wow.
And that courier bag was hand carried by Jesse Marcel Sr. into General Ramey's office. And people were wondering, well, how did that weather balloon that's in the photograph actually get in Ramey's office? Well, now we know, because Ramey and those boys had a piece of the wreckage, the actual wreckage that they have gotten off the airplane, that they showed to Marcel, and he said, yes, this is what I brought in. So then when the photographer showed up and they opened the satchel, it was the busted ass weather balloon. And Marcel was stuck because he was told to shut up and not say anything. So they took pictures of Marcel with that weather balloon. Marcel, in his 1978 interview, said that material went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. In fact, General Dubose, who was the chief of staff for General Ramey, sitting in the office and who is in those famous pictures with General Ramey, signed a legal affidavit that said, we sent that material to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Okay, so what do we know? Everything points to legal affidavits, videotaped interviews. The stuff came to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The guy who flew it here signed an affidavit, Pappy Henderson. Yeah, I flew the plane. I flew it in the Wright-Patt. So I am 1000% convinced, with all that story as background, whatever crashed at Roswell was brought to the materials laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in 1947, was examined here, a report was written, 1 or 2 copies are made. The guys who owned that material took everything, including the reports, never to be seen again. Roswell stuff came to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Immutable. Now we go on to the aliens. First of all, did you find that fascinating or what?
No, yeah, no, I'm just stunned.
Definitely.
That's
Great.
crazy. No, yeah, I want you to keep going. I want to hear more about the
Wait a
aliens.
second, Raymond. I have a question
Please.
before you go on.
Yes.
You've told us that they at some point they crumbled off pieces of the material. I think you said it. What do you mean by that? Do you know more about it? Were they able to tear it apart?
No. Apparently, the craft was made of more than one type of material. For example, look at an automobile. You know, we make the engine out of iron, unless you're the Chevy Vega, then they make it out of aluminum, and that lasts about 3 weeks. But you make your tires out of a different material. So this craft apparently was constructed out of different materials. And one piece of material that they found, the largest piece, according to the testimony of the man who should know, because he picked it up out of the field, was Major Jesse Marcel Sr. He said, the largest piece, we tried to take a sledgehammer to, and we could not dent it, ding it, whatever. We also took the other flexible pieces and we tried to hit it, burn it, cut it. So none of the material was prone to any of the tests to destroy a piece of it by tearing, cutting, or burning. And the softer pieces they found, which were thousands and thousands of pieces, which is what led a lot of people later to believe it was a balloon, but the materials didn't match, is they could take the material and fold it up into their hands. And when they opened their hands, it was like nitinol today, which is a metal which will reform close to its original shape. So squeeze it up, the flexible stuff, and it goes back, still can't burn, cut, or whatever. The hard piece that they found, the 2 foot by 3 foot section, could not be penetrated, likewise of the small pieces. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
Was there any symbols on these metals?
Yeah, yes, they were. And if you get this book called The Roswell Legacy, okay, written by the son of Jesse Marcel Sr., Jesse Marcel Jr., who himself was a pilot in the military and a medical doctor, tells you cool stuff about, I hope they give me a cut, tells you tells you cool stuff about the symbology that he saw, because on the way home, his father brought a box of the material into the house and said, Jesse, look at this stuff. You're never going to see this again. You're never going to be able to talk about it, et cetera, et cetera. And Jesse Marcel Jr. Has defined the hieroglyphic type symbols that he saw on there.
Wow. Because I heard too, didn't somebody like touch this stuff long enough where like it got radiation and someone got like super bad arthritis where they threw this stuff in a well? I don't know if that's connected to the Roswell case or something like that.
That is like, that's a late
about?
1800s airship crash in Texas. Okay. And when they went down into the well, there's a couple of good investigations there. It's really a cute story. And there's one about them burying a dead alien in the cemetery. And when Bill Burns and his UFO hunters went there, somebody had dug up that grave. Oh, it's great. It's a, but that's a totally, it's in Aurora, Texas. It's Aurora, Texas. It's a different story, I'm afraid.
I thought for sure, just because the material in general might have some radiation or some kind of properties to make someone sick. Like if there's been interactions with humans touching ETs and then they end up dying because they have some kind of oils on them, like that Mexican case, that one crash where they found one dead and a few alive.
Yes, that's another, it's another story that's hard to get factoids on, but if you are familiar with the Rendlesham Forest story, get online and follow Jim Burrow. John Burroughs was one of the 3 guys who actually touched the flying saucer there in Rendlesham Forest. Do you know that John Burroughs' medical records are still classified top secret?
Oh, no.
Really?
Wow. Absolutely. John Burroughs' records are still classified top secret. And he had a heart problem as a result of being in the vicinity of this flying saucer. But anyway, let's finish off the story about the aliens.
I have another question before we go on.
Okay.
Sorry, Raymond.
No, it's okay.
When was the last, let's call it, update on these crash retrievals? If there is such a thing as an update, when was the last time we heard of these things?
When was the last time well, there's a number of supposed retrievals. There's a book about Aztec written by a couple of folks I know who, they'll have to forgive me of not remembering their names. It's a husband-wife team, and they did a neat book about it, but it's big on circumstantial evidence, but it's not very strong on actual, everybody wants that piece of the flying saucer. I think the closest somebody came to doing actual work, it's a book by Art Campbell, and it's called The UFO Crash on the Plains of San Agustin. It's just look up Art Campbell. Art passed away a few years ago, regrettably, but I actually worked with Art on some of that. And it was late after he'd done some things, but Art actually shared with me a lot of his work because he knew that I was going to be making trips there with my metal detector, looking for additional pieces of metal. He actually recovered stuff and had it tested, and some of the test results of that metal are in that book. It's called The UFO Crash on the Plains of San Agustin, Art Campbell.
Yeah.
So that's the last thing that I really followed.
But we're not talking about these specific parts from the Roswell incident, right?
Well, that's not, that is and it is not related. Supposedly on the same date, there was an archaeological team on the plains of San Agustin that actually did, and it's documented, that they found a historical cave, and it made this guy famous. And supposedly the guys that were, and gals that were on this archaeological dig during the time that the Roswell crash happened saw a object come from exactly the Roswell direction, pass over the part of the plains, and then crash near Daddle, New Mexico. And then a show in the late 70s was on, and an individual by the name of Gerald Anderson came forward and contacted the show and eventually Stan Friedman and said, hey, I know this is hard to believe, but I had relatives that lived there. And days or weeks after this incident, we were near Daddle hunting geodes in a stream, and we found a crash flying saucer. And we never said anything about it, but here's the story. So Stanton Friedman collected that story and retold it after he checked Gerald out. And then Gerald and Art got together, Art Campbell got together because Art wanted to do an archaeological dig there. So there's that kind of history of somebody doing an archaeological dig on a reputed UFO crash site that has something to do with the Roswell crash site because it happened at the same time. But I would recommend reading Art Campbell's book, and it will bring you right up to speed on everything. Now, Art passed away, and his research partner, Chuck Wade, has long since given up that investigation. And all I found was tin cans. So Art was the one who found things that were tested, and it's reported on in that book.
Thank you. Very interesting. But let's get to the extraterrestrials. I'm sorry that I interrupted you.
I'm pooped out, man. I'm old, and I was going to tell you all about the aliens, the buildings they were at, but just kept asking me these questions, and well,
yeah.
look at the time.
Yeah, man, I'm annoying. I know I'm very annoying, but I want to know everything, man. I want to know it all.
Okay,
come on.
let's get back to the aliens. Unlike the evidence that exists for crash material coming to Wright-Patt, we don't have that level of testimony. Here we got a major that was the intelligence officer for a nuclear bombing group. We have the guy that at Fort Worth, who was a colonel at the time, who signed an affidavit saying this was a cover-up. We had alien records there. And he also did a video, if you look him up, General Dubose. It's a wonderful, wonderful interview. So got a live, you got his affidavit. It went to Wright-Patt. And if you look at the guy where he also in an office that it got sent to, there's also a smoking gun there, which I can't make the connection live here, but there's a connection there that is a third verification that the wreckage went to Wright-Patt. The alien stuff is third and fourth party. It's like nobody in the military stepped forward that you knew was in a position like Colonel Dubose or Jesse Marcel or any of the other military types who said that stuff went to Wright-Patt. There is no testimony on that level by people with those credentials. It's okay. It's the guy from the funeral home in Roswell who said, well, I got a phone call about, do I have any small childlike caskets? Okay. Well, the guy from the base called you about that, but how can you connect that to the Roswell crash? And then, he retells the story. So it's good. I mean, if you're a conspiracy theorist, let's jump on it. Let's make a mountain out of a molehill. That just doesn't, I'm not saying he's lying, but I know people that were on crash recovery teams, and they tell me when human bodies are found in a crash site, you can stuff some of them in a bag because there's nothing left of them. And so having small caskets could just be, hey, we're picking up pieces of these people, and we want to have something small to cart around when we're out there. We're carting these things. We have to cart them across the desert to get to the crash site. And so my crash retrieval people have told me more than likely they're not discounting the Roswell alien thing. They just said, you got to think of what makes practical sense. And he said, at that time of after the war, we're crashing 10 military airplanes a day, and we're picking up people, out of the desert. So, great to jump on the alien bandwagon, but it just lacks the proper evidence and the quality of evidence that would convince me that they actually recovered aliens dead or alive from that crash site. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it just doesn't have the same quality of backing that the material has, of which I'm 100% sure came to Wright-Patt.
It's very interesting. I see the picture behind you. It shows a picture of the alleged alien autopsy. So what's your thoughts on that, if you may?
Here's the lead in. A magazine or newspaper in the UK called me up and said, can we do an interview? Fine. Do you mind if I record it? No, better yet, I insist on it. So over the course of 2 hours, maybe longer, he asked me all these questions. Much like you, I answered the best I could. So 3 weeks later, I see a friend sends me a text or an email and says, hey, the UK Mirror just published this huge article about you on the front page. And I went, really? So I looked it up. Now, then a couple days pass. He goes, look, The Sun, they published another article on you. Finally, there's one behind here. I don't know what I did with it. The Sun, the Mirror, and yet another one. That's somewhere. They got the skeleton of the things correct. Like I worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I wrote these books about it. And then not a word of factual truth in the rest of the article. I said things like, there's a graveyard next to this very famous building at Wright-Patterson. They changed that to, Ray Szymanski said, aliens are buried underneath that parking lot. And it only got worse, seriously. So so what I did is I emailed Nick Pope. I said, Nick, this is terrible. Every UK rag is totally misquoting me. And he sent me a very short return. He goes, "Congratulations.
Yeah.
If you've been misquoted in those newspapers, you know that your time has come."
Yeah. When you're famous, you're famous.
Yes. So that particular incident, um, certainly, it shows the crashed craft, and there is no alien autopsy in that one, but in that picture down there is the alien autopsy. I believe that the guy who did that Santilli has already admitted to everybody it was phony. So, no, I don't think anyone's going to argue with that. Thanks, Ray. It's phony. All right. Then, yeah, it's already admitted to it.
Who knows? I
Well, the guy who filmed it said it's phony.
Maybe he got forced to say it. I don't know. I'm just asking questions, man. I don't
No,
know.
and the guys who've examined that story at length have poked so many holes in this story. I look at that and I go, yeah, that's the more reasonable explanation.
Yeah.
But Santilli has been debunked on this for
Yes.
a decade.
Yeah. I do think it's a hoax. So, but I'm very sorry, but I'm still not satisfied with the answer you gave me earlier on an earlier question I asked you.
Go for it.
I asked you, what was the closest you ever got on Patterson Wright Air Force Base to seeing something? Okay, you answered the questions, but did you meet someone on the Patterson Wright Air Force Base who has seen something and told you about it?
People tell me things all the time, things that they shouldn't tell me,
What?
and I have to take it with a grain of salt, simply because if I and I most of the stuff comes in one ear and out the other, simply because I don't have the time to verify it, or I don't have the interest in it, and I can usually dismiss, um, on just some purely public knowledge grounds, most of what people do tell me. So if somebody were to tell me, um, and they will make fun all the time. They'll go, I went down and I saw this vault and I did whatever.
Hmm.
You immediately, if you know the person, you pretty much know what their career subsisted of, and you can pretty much dismiss those kind of comments as being unrealistic.
What was the most believable story you've heard while you were still there?
I can't comment on that.
Okay, gotcha. It's a bummer. No,
Yeah, it is, because
it's all right.
you have a secrecy oath, and all my money every month comes from the government in my retirement, and I promise till the day I die and thereafter that I would never reveal anything that I knew was secret, or that I felt was secret. So
Mhm.
let me talk about an interesting dilemma for you lads. All right, so I write this book after I retire. I retired in 11. The book comes out, first book comes out in 2016. And what do I talk about? The fact that I believe that flying saucers exist, and that the wreckage came to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and all that stuff. And the reason I felt comfortable doing that is because up until 25 June of 2021, what did the government say? From 1947 until the 25th of June, 2021. They said flying saucers don't exist. There's no such thing as aliens. And so all you guys who had security clearances, you can talk about UFOs and flying saucers forever. In fact, when that first, maybe the second Roswell investigation was being done by the Government Accounting Office, the then Secretary of the Air Force, Sheila Widnall, said, I release everybody, it's in writing, I release everybody from their secrecy oaths on the topic of flying saucers, aliens, and Roswell. Anybody who has a story that they think is real is allowed, and will not be persecuted under the secrecy oath as long as you are participating in this government accounting office investigation. So everyone felt free to talk about it, and it was like a free pass. It's like, so, and this was before my book, so I felt no problem. Well, what happened on the 25th of June, 2021? Do you guys want to take a guess? What happened?
9/11?
On
No,
the
when?
25th of June of 2021,
No.
the Office of the Director of National Intelligence published that 9-page unclassified report. And what did it say in that report, right? The Congress had to get an unclassified report and make it public. What did it say? 1, flying saucers are real. 2, there is safety of flight issue. And 3, a potential national security issue. And I went, well, shit. Now they're saying flying saucers are real. Does that mean we're no longer allowed to talk about it? Because we were before, because they said they weren't real. Now they're saying they are real. And we're going, oh, this is a head scratcher. Where do we go from here?
Yeah.
So the government admitted, they said, not in these words, but they said UAP are real.
Yeah. Did they
Think
bring
about
that
that.
up back in 2017? They brought that back up, that they are real?
Well, that was a New York Times thing, but it wasn't officially admitted until the 9-page report came out on the 25th of June, 2021.
Okay. Damn. Where the fuck was I?
I don't know, but you better read it.
No, I believe you. Holy shit.
You should read it, Dustin. You just said 9/11.
I know. I was just like, why? I was
Yeah.
thinking of the year. I was like, well,
Yeah.
what happened that year?
Yeah.
I don't know,
Sit
sorry.
down. So I read you've been a skeptic at one point, Raymond. But I think there's a difference between being a skeptic and being a non-believer. So when you say skeptic, what do you mean? You've heard stories and said, crap, or
Well, I heard my stories throughout my career at Wright-Patterson, and I had this intellectual curiosity, I guess. So when the Phoenix Lights in March of 1997 hit the headlines, immediately the public affairs officer in that local area at Luke Air Force Base put out a press release. We didn't see anything on radar, all the typical stuff. It was, dust in your eyeballs. It was desert dust. Nobody saw anything. And they started to openly debunk it. Well, I'm now late in my career at that point, so 97, I'm maybe 15 years from retiring, but the topic of UFOs and having, worked at Wright-Patt was still very interesting to me. So it kind of rekindled my interest. The Phoenix Lights rekindled my interest in the whole topic. And I thought, well, here's a chance to send an email to the guy that just put out this national press release. So I looked him up and I asked him a couple questions. And of course, now he's insulting my intelligence. Like there's nothing to it. And I thought, aha. So I'm going to find out more about this. So I kind of got back into it and I was researching, and there was too much smoke and fire. So finally, this was maybe several more years. I wound up going on business trips that happened to be literally in the backyard of famous UFO cases. And I thought, look at, why don't you take what you know about Wright-Patt and some of your scientific instincts and see if you can apply this to these very famous cases and see what happens. Are flying saucers real? I don't know. Are they not real? But I was in the middle here. I said, let's see where this needle is going to go after I investigate. So I went to Exeter, New Hampshire. I actually had a trip to Hanscom Air Force Base. So in my free time, I went to Exeter. And again, this is all covered in this book. I found new evidence. I found new witnesses that had never been interviewed before. I put their stuff in that book. I went to Rendlesham Forest where the famous Rendlesham incident happened, and I investigated there. I talked to some new people. I talked to the key witnesses, Colonel Halt. I talked to Jim Penniston. I talked to John Burroughs. In fact, Jim Penniston is the endorser on the back of my Swamp Gas My Ass book. So if you flip over that cover, it's Jim Penniston's endorsement. So I went and I was with Travis Walton one afternoon at the site of his abduction, where they took him aboard the craft. And Travis and I spent the whole afternoon there examining the evidence of the tree trunks. I shot photographs there, and those photographs wound up in Jennifer Stein's movie, Travis Walton, The True Story.
Oh.
So I had Travis, the man, that afternoon in February, showing me from the site what happened and retelling me his story. So I got to the firsthand witnesses, plus my firsthand knowledge of Wright-Patt, and I put it together and I said, what are my conclusions? Well, my conclusions are pretty evident if you read the book, and that is the official story just doesn't hold water. And so not a debunker, but a skeptic and somebody who was scientifically based and wasn't going to take second and third hand information. It had to be from the fountain itself. And I did that. So yes, and I hate debunkers, and I will debunk debunkers anytime I have a chance. So yes, a skeptic, but that's what you do in science. Our job was to find a problem that needed solving and solve it. And you start out with that kind of an attitude.
Wow, that's so cool. You get to like hang out with Travis though, and go to the spot that he got abducted. And the tree thing was amazing. Even him figuring that out, right? Like that something might have happened to these trees where like the growth rate like happened faster or slower than usual. Can you,
Yes,
can you tell us more about the trees?
I can. They had done some filming for the Jen Stein's movie, the Travis Walton movie. Mm-hmm. Highly recommend it. And that is one of the movies we plan on showing for free to the people who show up. We have 3 movies lined up that we're going to show for free. One's going to be like a Saturday night after the regular session is over. And then we're going to try to show movies during the lunch break. We have a 90-minute lunch break. So Jen Stein has given us permission to show her movie. Paul Davids has given us permission to show his movie, the Roswell movie. And we have another very, very, very famous UFO researcher who's done movies before. I'm sure you can guess who it is. And I'm sure we'll get his permission. So anyway, your question was Travis Walton, the trees. They had just finished filming the Travis Walton movie a couple months beforehand, and they had taken police tape. And now to find the Walton site, it's not public. It's very difficult, but they had taped off this area in order for an event that happened there just the previous November. So when Travis came to my hotel in Heber, got into my 4x4, we drove up to the site. And along the way, it was fabulous. He was telling me what happened along the way. We saw a herd of wild horses. And I asked Travis, you want to get out and take some photographs? Well, I had hardly stopped the car, and he was exiting the car to go chase these wild horses. And the first thought that came to my mind was, you know, Travis, the last time you left a vehicle in the Apache Sitgreaves National Forest, things did not turn out in your favor. So I'm grabbing my camera, and there's Travis, and he's heading to the herd of wild horses. And I got my camera, and I'm shooting pictures of Travis. And again, there is a picture of that in my book. So I'm shooting pictures of Travis, and all along I'm thinking, well, you know, this is a wild herd and they could stampede. Then I'm thinking, well, I'm a marathoner. I ran 16 marathons, 2 Bostons, and I know that I don't have to outrun the herd. I only have to outrun Travis. So I'm going, Travis, you can back up, dude. You can get closer. And he's like, the man has no fear. I mean, he was on a
Wow.
spaceship. So he's
Yeah, right.
backing up, and I'm thinking, you better stop him, because you don't want to be the guy that was responsible for getting Travis Walton killed. So I
Right.
go, Travis, stop. Because a couple of the horses started to come closer to get a look.
Oh,
And I'm like,
shit.
hey, dude,
Not this guy. No.
That's so
Protect him at
I'm
all
funny.
out.
costs.
I'm out, dude. So
That's
it was
awesome.
a blast, and we ate dinner together. Well, we came back to the room because it was cold. I served them a cup of coffee out of the machine. Then after that, we went to a nice Mexican restaurant, and we looked at the photographs that we had taken. Those
Wow.
trees had been cut by other investigators, including one of the guys who was there with him that night, a Mike Rogers.
Okay.
And the premise was that there was an impact by the radiation that was the craft. So
Right.
without much guidance, I saw the treetops that were cut. They're no longer treetops, but tree trunks. And after chipping off the ice, because it had snowed that morning and the stuff froze, after chipping that stuff off, I took photographs of trees in that area. And what I noticed is I noticed that there was an exponentially larger pattern of growth in a direction that was pointing towards a centroid of sorts. So without a predefined concept,
Hmm.
I noted the photographs, and as I went along there, I knew which direction I was going in. I had a little notepad with me, so I knew where I started, and then I knew what direction I went in. And of course, the photos are all time tagged. So what I eventually wound up doing is plotting them, and then creating a report, which I gave to Jen Stein. And from that report, and people who read it, their conclusion, and my conclusion, was that the tree that were pointing in the direction of where the flying saucer was hovering had a faster growth rate, a noticeably statistically higher growth rate than other sample trees in the area.
Oh,
So
shit.
it, to me, was indicative of this. But you would need, we look for explanations like the wind. And, if you have a predominant wind, the tree will naturally grow stronger on one side to, keep the tree in place. And there's other things. There's water, there's soil. But just in a brief amount of time I was there, I threw these things at Jen and her review board, and they all agreed that it appears that this growth, and it's not just me, it's other people who've researched it. So if you look in the movie, that evidence is mentioned in the Travis movie, and at the end, my name appears in the credits.
That's so cool. Because it makes you wonder too if these UFOs were using trees as energy source too, to make it like the tree grow faster, to kind of like, you're aging something faster because you're taking the energy away from it, do you think a nuclear blast does the same thing to a tree from a distance? Like you see the rings be different in a nuclear blast because of the radiation. Is it different radiation? Is it different properties? I don't know. It just makes you wonder too why that happened.
Radiation can do that. There was a professor. His name was Levengood, and he had a lab in Michigan. And the crop circle experts would, like Patty Greer, for example, would send him seed samplings taken from the grains that were in the middle of the circles. And they took photographs of certain evidence. And if you look up Levengood's, I wish I could remember his first name, but I'm getting old, guys. if you look up Levengoods, he was not a PhD. He referred to himself, everyone referred to him as Dr. Levengoods because he was so smart. But if you look up Levengoods results, that the seeds actually had different growth properties from other seeds of the same plants that were gathered outside of the actual landing spots. But I think it's C.J. Levengood. But look up Levengood's work, and you'll see that is true what you said. There's an impact.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. It's very interesting.
Yeah, indeed, it's very interesting. Man, Raymond, I want to talk about your books, and but first, I'm interested if you ever had the chance to talk to Donald Raymond Schmidt about the Roswell incident.
That is a very touchy subject. Donald and his co-author, Thomas Carey, great researchers. They've brought a lot of information to the forefront. So kudos to them and everything they've accomplished. But they've written 2 books about Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and flying saucers. And I know for a fact that neither of them has ever set foot on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So to me, writing a book about Wright-Patterson and flying saucers and never having set foot on the base somehow to me seems a bit disingenuous. It's almost like, yeah, we know everything about Wright-Patterson. So, I mean, this is a mild complaint, but I think the readers need to consider, the source of the information. Great researchers, so, maybe they got Wright-Patt people to spit stuff up. But the biggest problem I have with them is in one of their Wright-Patt books, there's a story in there that is patently false. And it's a story about, in the very end of the book, where the base commander reputedly says, he slams his hand on the desk and he screams, Don Schmidt is not getting onto my base. Now, I know it's a false story, and I'll tell you in a minute how I knew. So I contacted Tom Carey and I asked him, what's the basis of the story? And he said, well, Don has a friend who was a colonel on the base, and that colonel was friends with the base commander we talk about in the book. And that friend of Don's is the one who gave us the story. And I have nothing to do with it. Don wrote it. So I said, okay, I'll contact Don. So I got his email and I contacted Don and I said, I pretty much know that this is inaccurate. And, I know you want to make it sound like, the base considers you the evil empire, but pretty much they really don't know who you are. And I know this is a false story. What's the basis for this? Well, this colonel friend I have, he told me the story. I said, well, did you ever contact the colonel who the story is about? Or did you just blindly accept this as fact, from your friend? He goes, well, I kind of believe him. He's given us good information. So normally I don't care what anybody writes about anything. It's not my job to, correct their misinformation. But the fact is that the guy he was talking about was my former boss when I was the wellness director at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And the incident was supposed to have taken place during the time this guy was my boss. And I knew it was patently untrue. And how did I prove that? Well, I contacted my former boss, who was now a 2-star general. And I said, read this. What do you think? And he sent me back an email, to which I have this day. He said, this is wrong. I don't know those guys. I don't know this colonel, and this never happened. So I contacted Don. It took me 6 months to chase him down. And he went, oh, well, you ever think about like changing that false story and apologizing to your readers? So that's why I have a problem. I could care less. You know, he told people that he had a certain degree. He didn't. He said he was a graphic artist. He wasn't. He fabricated a witness in one of his books, and that's why his partner stopped writing books with him. But I don't care. But if you start writing lies about Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, I am going to have to tell the truth. And if you're in the crosshairs, that's your problem. So, any other questions?
Gotcha. No, gotcha.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. Yeah, some interesting news for me. So
I don't believe half of what he wrote about Roswell. He already made up. Well, he already made up a witness in the Witness to Roswell book, and that killed it for me. I'm sorry.
oh yeah, we've talked to him in an interview, and I found his reports about how these witnesses got approached by officials and stuff, and yeah, I found it very interesting, to be honest. But now that I heard what you said, yeah, I don't know what to think about. But it is what it is. But let's get into some of your books. Let's get into Swamp Gas My Ass, and I think a good story to start off with. This book is, and I did read it somewhere, and maybe you can fill us in on this story. It's a story about the 1966 Hillsdale College UFO sighting. What happened?
Oh, great. So it's early March, and there's a writer for the Ann Arbor News. Ann Arbor is the place where the University of Michigan is located. They just won the national football title, the college football title. So go blue. So in these little towns around Ann Arbor, Dexter, Hillsdale, Milan, were reporting to the police officers who would listen that they're seeing these strange objects flying around. And then the police officers themselves were reporting up their chain of command that they were seeing the same things. So a reporter for the Ann Arbor News publishes this very small but information dense article in about the 13th or 14th of March. And it says, all of these police officers, all these citizens are reporting these strange lights. There were so many sightings by so many reputable individuals that the local politicians were contacted. And then future President Gerald Ford, who was one of the top politicians in the House of Representatives, it got onto his desk, and he heard the, what was going on. So it was through his influence that Project Blue Book sent Dr. Hynek and a couple of like a sergeant and another like an airman to help him to spread out an investigative team to collect evidence if it was there and interview people. So all of these people had seen it, and as the days were going on and Hynek was getting closer, the stories kept getting bigger and better documented, and all the stories were matching, and it was really this thing that was starting to go national. Hynek gets there and he gets to investigate for about 2.5 days. When it's all said and done, he has a big press conference that he thought was going to be at Selfridge Air Force Base, because Selfridge, they had F-106s there, as people can read in the book, and their job was to be the nuclear deterrent against a Russian bomber attack coming down over Canada. So they had these state-of-the-art F-106s, 2 squadrons. they didn't want anything to do because they had a huge mission. They wanted nothing to do with flying saucers. So instead of having the press conference at Selfridge Air Force Base, where Hynek knew it would be controlled and only maybe 1 or 2 press credentials could get issued, Selfridge says, we've got a better idea. Let's have this at the Detroit Press Club. So they do. 50 radio stations, TV stations, reporters from everywhere. And now Hynek has to face the music. What did you find? Well, what was going on, and we know this for a fact, was the sheriff who was the sheriff of Livingston County at the time. He gave Hynek office space. So when Hynek would go out with the sheriff and he would show him and he would interview all the guys, and then they would come back and he would use the office. Hynek goes out, picks up the telephone just after the sheriff had asked him, hey, what do you make of all this stuff? Hynek goes, I don't know. So he gets a call from Washington. He goes in, picks up the phone, comes back, and he tells the sheriff, hey, we've just figured it out. It's swamp gas. So the day after or later that night, they have this huge press conference, and Hynek had to tell the world it's decaying vegetation in a marsh. It's swamp gas. Well, at that point, future President Ford said, this is ridiculous. So he called them on the carpet, and he called the Secretary of the Air Force. He called Major Quintanilla, who was head of Project Blue Book. He called Professor Hynek. He said, I want something better than this flippant answer of swamp gas. And so he got this impromptu congressional committee, and he got all of the principals. Well, you know what they did? They lied their asses off. And I cover this in Swamp Gas My Ass. I cover how they said, well, the temperature was perfect for the creation and ignition of swamp gas. Nothing further from the truth could have been had. Again, it's all covered in the Swamp Gas My Ass book, how they lied, why they lied. So fast forward now. Oh, I don't know. This would have been, my Swamp Gas book came out in April of 2021. So this has been about 2019, 2020. The stars aligned. And, you're always researching something, and you're always making connections, and you're always connecting the dots. And then suddenly all the dots get connected, and you get a super lead that you got to run down. So I had developed this lead on a colonel, Gary K. Carroll, who happened to be a pilot at Selfridge Air Force Base in 1966. And I figured somebody there was part of this Rubik's Cube I was putting together had a story there that I found somewhere in a newspaper that said the F-106s out of Selfridge Air Force Base were scrambled to chase one of these flying saucers. And I thought, hey, there's a lot of retired military pilots right where I live, right in this area. Many come to Wright-Patterson, they get different jobs after, they're no longer flying. Maybe I could find somebody who was in the 94th or 74th F-106 squadron at Selfridge. And lo and behold, I find Colonel Gary K. Carroll. He is the hero of Swamp Gas My Ass. So I run him down. I go to his house. At that moment, he's outside with his dog. I introduce myself. I tell him, hey, I retired from Wright-Patt as a senior scientist, senior engineer. I wrote these 2 books. And it's my understanding that at one time in 1966, you were a pilot at Selfridge Air Force Base. And he said, well, what are your books about? And I said, well, I wrote them about flying saucers, thinking he's going to kick me off of his property. And he goes, well, then you're going to want to talk to me. I was so excited. My chest got hard. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. It was like, when like somebody pulls out in front of your car, that tightened chest feeling.
Yeah.
So he said, well, you're going to have to get me copies of your books because I want to read them. And later he explained to me, after we started doing the interviews, that he wanted to see how I was going to treat the subject. So that's why he wanted to read the first two books. And then he knew people, it turns out he knew people I knew, and he knew I was a good guy, and he read the books, and he was really happy how I handled the subject matter, coming in skeptically, but when the preponderance of evidence took me in a direction that, I was unafraid to make the call one way or the other. Either it was BS, I called it that way, or, there was gray basket stuff too. Or it was also, yeah, I'm fully behind this conclusion.
Mhm.
So that's how we met, is me putting enough dots on the canvas where the picture came forward and I found him.
Yeah. So what's the connection between your great book, Swamp Gas My Ass, and Nick Pope?
Well, Nick was somebody I met early on. And we both had connection, DOD, former military organization people interested in flying saucers and that sort of thing. And Nick was one of the first people I met at my first UFO conference. And Nick allowed me, I liked Nick. I liked him as a human being. I liked what he was doing. I liked him saying, I don't know if he didn't know. I liked him giving me factoids that maybe he didn't publish, but might help me in my research. So it was very, very helpful. Obviously Swamp Gas My Ass is about Colonel Carroll, and he did intercept the flying saucer in March of 1966. He is the highest ranking military member ever to come forward with a provable story like that. His DD-214, his military records, official records, and that of his wingman that day are in the book. Snippets from a formerly classified top secret NSA Umbra document are in that book. And so those are the kind of stories that Nick Pope chased down. So when I was looking for people to scrub my stories in my first book, I knew Nick would be interested. I knew Yvonne Smith might be interested, Paul Davids, other people like Preston Dennett. And I said, scrub this. You're skeptical. You have all this evidence that it's come across your desk. Tell me what you think about this. And on the back of that book, those four people I just mentioned wrote endorsements. They really liked what they saw, and they wrote endorsements. So moving forward, when I got through the second book, which maybe we can talk about later, I don't care, but Swamp Gas My Ass was an Air Force story. And I contacted Jim Peniston, whom I had been in touch with. And I said, Jim, I want your take on this, because I know it's real, but because this is the expose of a cover-up that involves the Air Force, and your book is an expose of a cover-up of an Air Force thing, I'd really like to get your take on it. And whether you agree to endorse it or not, it's okay, but I'd like you to read it. He goes, I love the book. And he, told me a lot of other stuff. He said, I'd be more than happy to write an endorsement. So he did. And once I got Jim Peniston in the fold, I contacted Nick. And I said, Nick, I got this new book coming out. Peniston, you wrote a book about Peniston and all. And I said, I think this is the closure we need. I want you to read the book in light of what you know about Rendlesham and MOD things and all sorts of that stuff. And I really respect your opinion. Just one way or another, I'd like you to write the foreword for my book if you think it's, worthy. So he read it. He goes, I love the book. It's spot on. And I'd be delighted to write the foreword. So I've got Nick Pope, who wrote, of course, his book about Rendlesham. He's interviewed all those lads many times. I've got Jim Peniston, who wrote the endorsement because he takes the cover-up angle in his endorsement. So that's hopefully answers your Nick Pope, Jim Peniston, how that all came together for my book. And I thought, I think if I get that kind of endorsement and with the evidence, and it's all evidence, 95% of the evidence should carry that book, then people will go, it's a pretty solid read. And it tells the truth about a story where the government went out of its way for days, weeks, months, and years to tell the swamp gas story. Mm-hmm. Totally went out, and here is the true story, and here's the cool thing. People have contacted me, eyewitnesses, that allowed me to interview them and record their interviews as kind of a Swamp Gas 2 book of evidence that have never been revealed, names that have given me, and I have recorded testimony. It's really cool. It backs up everything that the newspaper guys have said, that witnesses said, and I actually got to go and do some more site visits. I visited the landing site of the flying saucer. There's a guy doing a documentary about that. I took lots of photographs. We did radiological tests. So if I'm somehow convinced by somebody with a big fat, I don't know, book publishing deal, I would be tempted to share that. I'm just putting that out to the universe.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think in context with your book, you mentioned the balance between serious and sometimes not so serious misadventures. So can you share one of your less serious but still remarkable experiences during your research travels?
Yeah, I could share a couple. As I told you, I went out to the plains of San Agustin with my metal detector, and based upon maps that were given to me by the people who did the original archaeological dig, because they were no longer capable of doing it. I went out there, and the people that were with me, we did our work during the daytime, and we had permission from the rancher, and we have the combination to the lock, a very heavy lock on that gate. So you can get in two ways. You can crawl the barbed wire fence, and then if they catch you on the land, they have the right to shoot you because there's cattle there, and they have the legal right to shoot you as a cattle rustler. The other thing is you can open the gate, unlock it legally, drive your car in, and then lock the gate behind you. And then anybody, law enforcement or anybody else, realizes that since your car is on the other side of the gate, you're legal, and they will leave you alone. So one night, the people that I was doing the dig with wanted to go stargazing. And one of them wanted to be abducted by aliens. So since they were working for free, I said, let's go take a couple of beers and some snacks, and we'll go to the middle of this field and we'll lock the gate behind us. So we go, and they said, well, maybe we should just drive 100 feet in, just enough to get off the little road there. I said, yeah, fine, because there's big holes and stuff, and we might get lost. So here we are, we're like an hour or two in, we're a couple of beers in, and down one of the other roads comes a light, and it's coming at us. And one of my friends goes, I'm gonna be abducted. And the other of us were going, we're gonna push you forward, man. Well, what it was is, on the top of this truck, excuse me, we'll call them rally lights. They sit over the cab of the car, and they're bright as hell, and they're rally lights, but they're coming down this little side road, not the main road. But it's also that side road is at elevation, so it's coming through the trees. And if we were a little less skeptical, we would have said, is this a flying saucer coming at us? Because the closer it gets, these lights are now starting to spread out on on that bank of rally lights. And my friends are getting excited, and I'm starting about to drop a brick. And suddenly it just comes right at us, and it slaps on the brakes, and from the main road to where the gate is let's say 50 feet. And so it's high speed skidding to a stop, freaking rocks and dust everywhere. And my friends are about to have a heart attack. And I'm just sitting there calm because I'm thinking it's the rancher or somebody else, and they're going to hop out of the cab with a gun and ask us what we're doing there. But me thinking ahead, going, well, we're on the other side of the fence is locked, we're obviously legal to be there. And it was a truck, and it stopped. Nobody ever got out. They put their headlights on, they fully illuminated us. I waved, my friends waved. The truck went in reverse, went down the main road, and we never saw him again. But I'm telling you, for that 30 seconds, it was a thrill and a half.
Yeah. You were thrilled because you thought you're going to get shot, and your friend was thrilled because he was about to be abducted. Yeah, he was so happy.
I was going to duck behind them. Take her.
Yeah, take her.
It's funny. It's like you leave Travis behind to get stampled by horses, and you leave this other dude to get abducted and shot.
You're getting people in trouble, man.
I know, right? I run faster than both y'all.
So, Raymond, we're almost at the end, but I can let you off the hook now.
Yes.
I have a few more questions, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
So, in your book, it says you have over 100. I think I read 100 never before published photos. That are pretty impressive. What are we talking about? What kind of photos?
No, you have to put it in context. I have thousands of photos of things of interest. I mean,
maybe he's talking about physical photos do you have, or maybe is it a digital collection that you have? Or
I think in your book, your book presents over 100 never before published photos.
Right, that's in the first book where there's photographs there that there's like 100 photos just in that book.
Yeah.
But as you do research, you find things. I have a couple lights in the sky that I couldn't explain, but I don't try to, because they're lights in the sky. Or people share photographs with me of their scoop marks or their bruises, and they believe they're they're abductees. So people share those kind of interesting things. In fact, Victoria, who's in my second book, Victoria's Secret Truth, she believes she's been an abductee since she was a small child. She believes her grandson is, and I've interviewed him, and all of that information is in the book, Victoria's Secret Truth. Excuse me. I've interviewed the grandchild at length, and I believe his story. Victoria has a scoop mark. I saw it. I got to put my finger in it. I will tell you, I literally got to, she pulled up her pant leg. We took photographs of it. I know, but it's like, Doubting Thomas putting his, I could definitely see that it's a scoop mark, but there are other people who have read the book and have only come forward to me because they said, well, I thought I was the only one, or, me and my children, we all have the scoop mark, and we know that this can't be by accident. And, on days I've woken up thinking, I was on a spaceship. At breakfast that next day, my children reported that we were all on a spaceship together, and we all have scoop marks, and we've all have unexplainable scars. So people give me that evidence, and I hold it in trust. Maybe someday I'll ask their permission, but right now I'm not really motivated to write another book. I'm spending a lot of my time getting ready for this conference, and hopefully, we can get people from around the world there. It's going to be very boutique-ish. We're looking at about 400 people for Friday night's dinner, so those tickets will be extremely limited. We're looking at maybe maxing out at, I'm just going to throw a number, don't hold me to it, we're probably going to max out at maybe 500 or 600 for the venue itself, just because of circumstances, related to security and safety and all of that. So, and our capacity to do the right thing, make sure everybody has a good time there. So we may be just limiting it artificially, because we don't want to cram people in just to make a buck. That's not what it's all about. It's everybody comes away with a good education, illumination, not too many people where the speakers are overwhelmed at their speakers tables or at the social hours. So it's really for the people. Mm-hmm. is what it's about. So I'm spending a lot of time doing that right now.
Very interesting. So in all these years, you're researching UFOs/UAPs for many years now. So how has your perspective changed when you started compared to now? I'm talking about where they come from, who is inside, what is their agenda, propulsion systems, multiversum, or different planets, or maybe multidimensional beings. Yeah, Dustin is right. So what was your view on that when you started, and what's your view on that now?
Wow, those are 8 questions, but I'll try to get them all in the order you said.
We're running out of time.
All right, well, quickly, I'd heard all those stories for all those years, and then I put the stories together with things that I had seen. And so I said, well, there must be something to this, because it made logical sense. So then I went out on that quest to basically poke holes in the biggest stories, and if I could, then the rest would fall by the wayside. So if I could take Rendlesham and poke holes in that story, Exeter, Travis Walton, Wright-Patt, things that I could get to, if I could poke holes in that, so that was my approach. Go in there with the scientific thing. Okay, this doesn't work, move on. But it turns out the more I poked, the more evidence I found. So I said, okay, well, I need to expand my horizon. So I went to all these conferences and I talked to the people who were up on stage, and I got them in social settings. And Nick Pope, I had beers with Nick Pope, for example. And I quickly was able to figure out who the charlatans were and who the people were that had the good, solid evidence, that whose opinion I could lean on. So then you gather more and more people, so your points of reference continue to increase. And if you surround yourself with good sources and you read good materials, you quickly become expert enough where you know what's BS and you know what you can put in your gray basket and maybe validate later. So as the days, weeks, months, and years go on, you kind of develop that expertise. Yes, you can be fooled, and Peter Robbins will be the first one to tell you that. He had Larry Warren fool him for 9 years, and he wrote Left at Eastgate, which is a great book, but some of it is poppycock because Larry Warren gave him poppycock. But you quickly get that expertise, and you can cut through it. So I went from let's find out what all this is about to this is interesting stuff, let me dig further, to I think there's so much evidence of it being real that I'm going to take this on as something that I want to do with as much time as I can give to it. So then I got retired in 2011. I started going to conferences, make friendships, read everything that I could. I went to archives, I went to libraries. I did everything I could to get as close to what I call bedrock as I could. And then I found individuals who had experiences that were willing to talk to me because I wrote the first book. And then there were people who saw my first 2 books and said, dude, I got to get this off my chest. I want to tell you something. And it wasn't only about flying saucers. It was about other things that, because I worked at Wright-Patt, they could relate to. So, there was that sort of stuff. And then, now that the third book has come out, and, it's got the DD-214s for the pilots. It references other books that were formerly classified. It was unafraid to take down Project Blue Book and Dr. Hynek and the 1966 sightings, where people say, hey, I was there in 66. Can you interview me? And by the way, here are the 3 people that I was with that night, and they want to talk to you. And so it's really cool now to see that evoking that positive response, and that 2021 government document come out where they said it's real. And my family, who said, Dad, I think you got a nut loose, and yeah, let's humor Dad. And my cousins, and there's Uncle Ray and Cousin Ray, and yeah, hey, he's okay. And now they're going, dude, you're the man. They saw that report. You're the genius. Now they're all going, yeah, I knew it was true, and I'm laughing. He did not.
I always believed in him. I always believed in him.
No, and they didn't believe it. And so now I'm everybody's hero.
That's
And
awesome.
which is kind of cool.
It is.
It's kind of cool, but that has taken me far over the line. And the government, I knew it was poppycock before they admitted it. And so here we are. And if somebody doubts it, I just go, what else do you need? But, well, they didn't land on the White House lawn. Well, there's a very good reason. Every time they get close to doing that in 1952, you chase them off by scrambling all those jets. Give them a chance to land on the White House lawn. They'll do it. I promise you. You give them a chance, they'll land right on the White House lawn.
That'd be interesting. That'd be awesome.
Here we are.
I want to be alive when that happens.
Well, somebody asked me like 3 years ago, before this thing came out in 2021, in your lifetime, do you ever think the government's going to admit the flying saucers are real? And I said, well, based upon the evidence, I don't think so. So even though you've got tons of evidence, you can be wrong about speculation.
Sure.
And just yesterday, I proved that one of my speculations was correct. I have a bet for like $100, and I will collect it. Well, my heirs will collect it the day after I die. My bet is that the Detroit Lions will never make it to the Super Bowl. And yesterday, they came within 2 or 3 bad calls of me losing that bet. But I have a bet that says before I die, the Lions will never make it into the Super Bowl. So, man, that was close.
That's funny.
Let's a few thoughts on the future of UFO/UAP research. Do you think we can rely on the government, on the research the government does, or the military? Or, yeah, I thought so. Nodding.
I think it's just this. This is what we're gonna get. This little slow little drip of disclosure. The fact that even Congress is even talking about it. It is the little flip of it's not the crazy farmer that has to prove that UFOs exist. Now it's Congress's turn to prove that they don't exist. So it is a little flip flop. Again, I think it's as far as we're gonna get as disclosure gets. It's just little teeny drips.
So whom do we rely on, Raymond?
Well, the civilians that have been investigating this for, I tried adding up how many years the speakers, just the 6 that we have commitments from, how many years those 6 speakers have been investigating what they've been investigating. It's like 40 years, 30 years, 40 years. So it's like almost 300 years of investigation. And I'm thinking, well, if you can't believe those people, at least on the core things they say, there's really nobody to believe. And so, at the conference, I'm going to list my 5 top books that I think and that everybody should read who's interested in this. The most factual, the most interesting, the most stimulating. Not that it's each of those is 100% true, but they're written by, I think, the best people who did the best research for the best evidence. And I'll recommend, and maybe eventually, I've got a website that I just threw out there because somebody said you need one. I haven't updated it in like 5 years. I should probably do that and put that book list. In fact, when I give the keynote address that Friday night on the 20th of September at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, one of the slides that I'm going to throw up is going to be my top 5 list that I want everyone in that audience to read. And that's how you do it, because you're just going to get smoke and mirrors coming from those congressional investigations and all the people that were hired to write whatever the congressional investigation people, told them to write. It's just, you got to get it from the civilian workforce.
True.
Hey, one last question. Because
Of course it is. One last question.
yeah, it's always one
I know,
last.
this guy-
I know. I'm very sorry, man. I know.
No, I'm not eating dinner for another hour, but
Yeah. Yeah. You have to carry a package. So I do believe that all these phenomena like UFOs, like paranormal phenomena, poltergeist activities, ghost apparitions, stuff like that, maybe even cryptids, I think it is possible, absolutely possible for me, that all this has the same source, comes from, yeah, one source. What do you think about that?
well, there's enough evidence of just the phenomena itself to try to solve and learn without having to, rationalize it by adding in other things. You guys ever hear of a man by the name of James Randi?
Yeah.
The amazing Randi.
Yeah,
All right.
he's awesome.
He was
He's
a debunker too, right?
Mhm.
He is a debunker, but he hated that term. But he basically is an explainer, and I loved his book to death called Flim Flam. You got to read Flim Flam. So he said, "Look, I have $1 million, and anyone who can prove to me under controlled conditions that psi is real, psychics are real, all this under controlled condition, we have $1 million." And they proved 1,000,000 times that they had the money. No one ever collected the $1 million, ever.
Right.
And it was because what they did is they took away the opportunity for the flim flam people to actually do their sleight of hand or anything else that allowed them to create something that looked like it was psychic. So it's a huge leap for me. First of all, the UFO alien thing is a big enough topic onto itself without having to connect it to anything else to make it more mystifying or more important. So that's why I don't do that. Interdimensional stuff, certainly we're at the infancy of our science as proven by these craft that defy our physics. They blink in, they blink out. Our very venerated pilots saw these craft, Tic Tac craft, go from 0 to 80,000 feet and recorded on radar. So we have visual guys on board on the ship. They saw these things perform these miracles. So there's a physics out there that we don't understand. Why can't these be interdimensional? Well, certainly they could, because there's science that we don't know. They can be anything. They could be angelic. They could be anything because we don't know everything. And so am I going to research that? Probably not. I got too many other things I want to do. I'm not going to boo-hoo it. But I'm not going to say that, I'm holding something in my hand right now. And I promise I will give either of you $1,000 if you can tell me what it is. And I would do that to any psychic. I will pick, and I've done this before. I've called the bluff. People have had me on the show. I'm psychic. I've got remote vision. I go, great. I know you're looking at one part of my room. I have something in my room. It's something that I'm emotionally, physically connected to. It's sitting in a place that you can't see. I'll give you $10,000 if you can remote view right now and tell me what it is. Man, the conversation has never shifted faster.
Yeah.
Well, I need this. So I got something in my hand right now. If either of you tell me what it is, it's worth $1,000.
Well, I'd say it's a harmonica.
And I'll say it's a paperweight.
Wrong, both of you. But I will tell you, the man from Germany is extremely close.
Oh,
and
man.
I will show it to you right now. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah.
Guitar tuner.
Yeah, it's a guitar tuner.
Oh, wow.
You
That's
should give
very
me
close.
at least 50% of the price. No,
that's
Very
funny.
good. So you might be psychic.
I'm a harmonica player, man.
So anyway, you don't have
funny.
to gussy up the UFO thing with anything else. And I'm always willing to, see the truth, but that would be really hard to prove since we don't know the first thing about flying saucers and aliens.
That's right. That's why Earth is the Disneyland of the galaxy. So it makes more sense.
That's right. That's great. Can I use that?
You can use it all you want.
But wait a minute. Do I have to make a reservation? Because at Disneyland, you're going to make a reservation. You're going to buy those tickets. And I love it.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's great.
That's great. And it was a great talk, Raymond. I had a lot of fun.
Was.
Yeah, very interesting talk. I had a lot of fun today. Thank you so much.
Me too. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great questions.
Thank you. Is there anything else that you want people to know? Maybe where they can contact you or some websites, Facebook pages, something like that?
Look for my books on Amazon, and they're available all over the world. I don't get many sales out of Germany, but that's okay. That's 50 Shades of Grays, Victoria's Secret Truth, and Swamp Gas My Ass. And I'll let you guys know this. If you want autographed copies of my book number 1 and book number 3, there is one place on the planet that sells those books. It's the National Museum of the United States Air Force. I know you're going to shake your head and go, what? The Air Force is selling your autographed copies of your book? And the answer is they are.
Wow.
It's called the Air Force Museum. And if you get on the web and look up Air Force Museum Store or it's the Air Force Museum Store, go to 50 Shades or type in Swamp Gas. My books will come up and you can get an autographed copy.
That'd be cool. Sweet.
That's top secret. I don't tell many people that.
Yeah, need to double check.
Guys, go ahead.
Yeah, need to double check.
All right, all my secrets are revealed now.
Yeah. No, you haven't.
Daniel asked enough questions. Get to that core.
Still not satisfied with this one question I asked you earlier, but that's all right, I guess. Okay, Raymond, we will put links to your books in the description, of course.
Please
do
that.
So thank you again, and thanks to everybody who made it this far in the podcast. We had a long podcast today, I think about almost 2 hours.
2 hours. Yep.
Yeah,
that's
great. It was great. And Raymond, please stay with us for 2 more minutes, okay?
Sure.